So, I'm sure a lot of you are curious. What is an American myth? Right? What is a myth, Daji? Right? When we think about myths, right, we think about Odin, Thor, Damastroy, right? The Damavoy, whatever, right? So today we're going to mix it up a little bit. We're going to bring some modernity and some new approaches to talking about culture, identity, and what is an American. So I'm sure you are looking at me right now and you are asking yourselves, who is this kid? Who is this man? Why does he have headphones? Why does he have a badge? Why are his shoes white and the rest of his outfit black? Wow, crazy.
And where is your hat?
No hat this time, unfortunately. It's hot outside. It's really hot outside. But yes, so this is where identity comes in. Very exciting. Cool. So let's begin. My name is Aaron, and welcome to the journey of identity. Cool. So, cultural myth, right? When we talk about mythology, we talk about Zeus. We think about sacrifices. But when you add a cultural element, what could this possibly be? So, cultural myth is an idea about one's cultural environment, right? Kulturная природа, right? A worldview of people that explains elements of the world, our surroundings, our окружающее, right? Our customs, our ideals of society, because of the way we were brought up, right? Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot. It's gonna get more complicated, so bear with me, right? So here we have some typical regular myths, yeah? We have unicorns, we have the Yeti, we have some sort of wolf, it's cute, and then we have beloved Odin, though, you know, Valhalla. He's looking good. He's looking good in that chair. So, right. What are some Russian cultural myths? What are some ways, some notions or ideas that Russians have about culture, about the way that Russian culture is unique? What? Русская душа, right? Огромная, широкая русская душа. Excellent. I love it, right? We see it in the literature. We see it in the way that people talk about Russian culture, how they talk about how exceptional, how unique, how огромный it is, right? In America, we have something very similar. So, in America, there are a few myths. I am going to talk about a few because we do not have so much time. Let's start with manifest destiny. So, manifest destiny is a term that comes from the mid-1800s. The idea of manifest destiny was that Anglo-Saxon Americans, right, white people, right, have a mission. And it's a special mission because it's from God, right? To expand civilization and white institutions across North America. Wow, that sounds special, right? We've seen this before. Wow, this is not new. But it is American, right? Before this, America was small. America was a set of colonies. Now, America was looking forward to trying to expand the country. Yeah? So, as a result of manifest destiny, what do we get? We see expansion westwards. We see this whole idea of what does it really mean to be American starting to develop and starting to grow, right? Like with all colonialist aspects, people get displaced, people get killed, right? But it's okay. God told us we could do it, right? God told us we're on a holy mission. Amen. Great, so that's one myth. A more modern myth, right? So we're leaving the 1800s, we're moving into the 1900s, and where we are today, the 21st century, right? The American dream, right? There is a saying that I really like, that the grass is always greener on the other side, right? So, has anyone ever heard this saying? Yep. Yeah. So, we have our plot of grass, but grass always looks better where we are not, right? Because we are jealous. Yeah. Cool. So, let's start with the American dream. So, in 1774, the governor of the colony of Virginia said, "Americans forever imagine the lands further off," right, vdali, right, "are still better than those upon which they are already settled." Bless you. It sounds very similar to this saying, right? We are happy here, but no, we want to move further. Yeah? If they attained paradise, they would move on if they heard of a better place farther west. So initially, the American dream was tied to manifest destiny, right? It was tied to pursuing something more, to pursuing something different, and expanding what people already had, right? So let's talk about the dream today, right? The dream today for all Americans, old and new, is to achieve prosperity through hard work, right? So, right, you come from a poor background. Your family has very little education, not much money, and you work hard. You work so hard. The dream is that that work will pay off, right? You will be able to be successful. You will be able to do better than the generation before you, right? That is the dream, right? Everyone wants that. Why is this uniquely American? Right? So, the whole idea is that America is this new land, right? It lacks the history of other cultures, of other identities, and what makes it uniquely American is that you can start from scratch. You can recreate yourself, right? When my great-grandparents moved to the United States some 100 years ago, right? They brought this mentality with them, right? They said, whoop, Ukraine, Lithuania, Scotland, it's not looking so good. It's time to start somewhere new, right? It's time to build a new life. So the whole idea is that without these artificial искусственные barriers, right? We can make individual choices without limitations, without looking at race, without looking at ethnicity, without looking upon socio-economic conditions, and you can succeed, right? So, there is a TV show from the 1950s called Leave It to Beaver, right? It represents the ideal American family, right? A strong male figure, head of the house, right? Hard-working, clean cut, happy nuclear family, Yeah, nuclear family, good term. One income, right? So the male does all of the work. A suburban house, right? So you have your own land, your own земля, right? 2 children, a safe public school, where your prosperity, your success is always growing, and your children will have a better future than what you have now. It sounds lovely. It sounds wonderful. But is this reality? Well, somewhat. Some people.
50-50.
Not 50-50. I definitely would say.
30-70.
I don't have a statistic. This is not my area of expertise. But, right, there is a lot of inequality, right? There is an absence of равенства, right? It's hard. It's hard for people, right? When you look different, when you have different customs, different traditions, and you are trying to succeed in a language that is not your own, in an identity that is not your own, you need to find some way to succeed. It's hard. It's very hard. So, more on that later. American exceptionalism, right? So we've moved on from the 1800s. We've moved on from this concept of American dream. Now we're going to talk about American exceptionalism. For those of you that have taken B1, we talk about exceptions, исключения, right? So exceptionalism means that you are better than everyone else. Лучше всех, right? Exceptionalism. Yeah. Cool. So there are 3 ideas in the concept of American exceptionalism. Number 1, the history of the United States is inherently different from other nations, right? This means that it is very unique, very special, and very different. This idea comes from the American Revolution, right? So when the colonists first moved to the New World, they said, we want something different. We want to establish our own identity, right? And so they said, hey, we have some ideas about establishing this new identity. Liberty, svoboda. Egalitarianism, egalitarism. Individualism, individualism. Republicanism, republicanism, right? Democracy, demokratia. There's another word that has an R, not that. And laissez-faire, невмешательство, right? For business. Free market economy. Cool. That is one idea. That is one idea. Laissez-faire from the French, right? Means hands off. So, cool. That is one idea, one big idea, right? The second idea about American exceptionalism is that the US has a unique mission to transform the world. Wow. Right? So, as Abraham Lincoln put it in 1863 in his famous Gettysburg Address, Americans have a duty to see that the government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Perish means to die, right? So, this idea is that government for the people, with its authority coming from the people, right, will not die. We want governments to come from the настоящие корни, the real roots, right? Real society. Not from the top, not just from the bottom, but from everywhere and everyone. That sounds wonderful too, right? But, you know, it's hard. Society is big. Society is complicated, right? But as an idea, I think that sounds quite nice. The third idea is that its history and its mission give the United States a superiority over other nations or states. Right? Here, I know that nations and states are two different ideas. In my presentation, we will consider them to be one idea, just to make it simple. Cool. So this means that there is something about the United States history that makes it better than other histories. Is this true? I don't know, right? What does better mean? It is all relative. На самом деле. Okay, cool. Done. American exceptionalism. Any questions so far? No. Let's move forward.
Please explain better egalitarian.
Egalitarianism. So it is a whole idea of equality, right? To a certain extent, right? In the 1800s, well, there was a large percentage of the population that wasn't considered to be equal to everyone else. But in modern society, it is the concept of respecting everyone equally. Ideologically, right?
Without
Ideally.
for white only.
Ideally, right? Ideally, right? So Lincoln, right? There is a whole concept behind Lincoln, right? He freed the slaves, right? And so there was this expanding concept of making other people have equal rights, right? But equality didn't really start coming into effect until a little bit later, and arguably, you still won't find real equality anywhere in the world, right? But it is an ideal. It is an ideal. Much like all of these ideas, yeah? They are ideals. Reaching them is a different story. Cool. Good? Super. All right, let's talk about cultural theories. I love this, right? So, when we talk about Russia, right, sometimes we forget to talk about the fact that Russia is a многонациональная страна as well, right? In Russia, there are over 175 nationalities or ethnicities, right? And there are many ideas in the United States about what many different cultures coming together looks like, right? So we have these two wonderful metaphors, right? So does everyone know what a pot is? A кастрюль, right? Yes. Or даже kazan, if we want to have a big one for plov. Right? So the metaphor of the melting pot is that there are many cultures, right? So if we can extend this metaphor, right, let's say that every vegetable is a different culture, right? So we have your potato, yeah. We have your cabbage, we have your peppers, and you mix it, right? Like you're making shi, maybe? And right from potatoes, from cabbage, from whatever else you put into your soup, right? You get a new product, right? So you get potatoes with cabbage, right? Sometimes you get just cabbage, sometimes you get just potato, but the entire result is something new. So, the metaphor of the melting pot represents that you have all of these cultures living side by side, and they are creating something new, на самом деле, right? So, this is representative of a new American culture, a super culture, whoa, right? That is one metaphor that describes what sort of happened in America, and still happens to this day. There is a second metaphor, that of the tossed salad, right? So, the idea of the tossed salad is that you have your cucumbers, you have your tomatoes, you mix them, but they are still separate, right? So if in the melting pot you get one new superculture, in a tossed salad, you still get to taste your tomato, you still get to taste your cucumber, you still get to taste your olivki, right? And it's yummy, right? Cool. So these are two different cultural theories that are often talked about when we think about what modern day America looks like. Oh yeah. Okay, cool. So let's get into a little bit more about the history of these cultural theories. This is a lot. Don't worry, we'll break it down together. So, the origin of melting pot of the term comes from a play, right? Does everyone here know Romeo and Juliet? Yeah, right? It's sad. I cry. Maybe you cry too. Right, so the idea of the melting pot is it comes from an American adaptation of Romeo and Juliet. Except this time it is set in the United States, not in Italy, right? So, the protagonist of this play is David, right? He is a Russian Jew, right? And he falls in love with Vera, a fellow Russian immigrant who is Christian, right? Cool. Let's start by analyzing this, right? It is ironic that Vera's name means Vera, right? Faith. Wow, right? So there is already a clash. We can already tell that there will be some sort of clash of cultures, right? Vera is idealistic, and David is a composer struggling to create a new American symphony to celebrate his new homeland. Together, they manage to overcome the hatred from their country, right? And then there's drama, right? We all like drama. So David discovers that Vera is the daughter of a Tsarist officer who directed a pogrom that forced him to flee from Russia. Very sad, right? He is horrified. He is devastated, right? He says, "No, I must break up with you. Our love is not that strong," right? And then this represents the idea that he can no longer, or they can no longer, transcend religious and ethnic animosities, right? Враждебности. However, unlike Shakespeare's play, this doesn't end here. There is a happy ending, right? They manage to overcome their враждебности, their animosities. They manage to create this melting pot. They say, wow, we might be different, we might come from different backgrounds, different cultures, but together we make something new, right? And that's why this metaphor is so often used, because it represents the start of something new, like High School Musical. Okay, moving forward. Right, so in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, European immigrants to the United States became diverse and increased a lot, right? Like my great-gramps and my great-grandma, right? Beginning in the 1890s, large numbers of Southern and Eastern European immigrant groups arrived, right? So, what is a Southern European immigrant group?
Italy.
Italians, yay! Greeks too, but Italians, right? New York. When you think about New York, you think about, yeah, super, right? Many of these people returned to Europe, but those who remained in America merged into this melting pot and adopted American lifestyles, right? So, the people that come from South and Eastern Europe, right? They look like you and I do, right? They look like us. They have white skin. Their facial features are similar for the most part, right? Similar looking. Meanwhile, at the same time, there are a lot of Chinese immigrants moving out to the west, right? To work on railroads. But Chinese people weren't accepted into society, right? There were quotas. There were limitations on the number of Chinese immigrants. Talk more about this in a bit. You'll see. So, our stage has been set. In the early 20th century, the meaning of the concept of the melting pot became a big part of the debate on immigration. Right? This debate talked about what should immigration look like? How does immigration impact American society? And how should immigrants be treated? Right? So, the melting pot had two sorts of sides to it, right? There is acculturation, acculturacja, or total assimilation, assimilacja, right? Zainstowanie. Right? So, of European immigrants, right? And the debate was centered on the differences between these two ways of understanding immigration, right? This quote, I like it, right? Was the idea to melt down the immigrants and then pour the resulting formless liquid into the pre-existing cultural and social molds modeled on Anglo-Protestants like Henry Ford and Woodrow Wilson? Or was the idea instead that everyone, Mayflower's descendants and Sicilians, Ashkenazi and Slovaks, would act chemically upon each other so that all would be changed and a new compound would emerge? Wow. Let's analyze this, right? So, there is this idea, right, that we have all of these different ethnicity groups, yeah? So, should they be molded, right? Should their new identities be formed based off of white Anglo-Protestants who already lived in the United States, right? So these people, like Henry Ford and Woodrow Wilson, right, already have an existing American identity, right? So should these people be molded into creatures like Woodrow Wilson or Henry Ford? Or should we combine elements of all of these cultures to make something new by itself? Right? It's a serious debate. It's interesting because guess what? We still see this debate today, everywhere, not just in the United States. It's still important to this day, right? Whether you're in Russia, whether you're in France, right? Whether you're in Israel, whether you're in Latin America, this is important. It happens everywhere.
Who is Ashkenazi?
Right, so the Ashkenazim, that's a good question. So it refers, so it's a specific, I guess, identity and ethnic group. So in Judaism, right, there are Ashkenazim, there are Sephardim, right, and Ashkenazim come from Eastern and Western Europe, and Sephardim come from North Africa. So they're kind of, on the one hand, they're ethnically similar, but they are culturally different.
But can we call them Jews?
No. Well, they are Jews, right? The full title is Ashkenazim Jews, but they are completely different ethnically. Religious practices are also extremely different. We can talk about that later if you want. Okay, so, done. Melting pot, check. Let's talk about the tossed salad. or the salad bowl. Right? So this idea is a contrast to the melting pot, because we have separate elements to make a salad, right? The concept of the salad bowl says that there are many pure and unique elements in addition to mixed and assimilated cultures that already exist in the United States, right? It's easy, right? So melting pot, we have this new superculture, toss salad, right? Let's all live together and feel all right. Yeah, right? So tolerance is a key part of the salad bowl, right? Respecting your neighbor, appreciating your differences with your neighbor's differences, right? So you have here, right? You see the bread respects the meat, right? And the bread also respects the greens. They're separate, right? But in there, there's a harmony. Together, they make a nice, yummy salad. All right, so cultural theories. Done. So let's talk about identities. This is where I want you guys to think about this term. In Russian, there is a term, it's not a чистый перевод, but we'll use it. We call it общественная конструкция, right? A social construct, right? Yes, я знаю, что есть такие слова, but let's use it. When I say social construct, I want you to imagine that society determines what these terms mean. That's what общественная конструкция means. Right? So, what is an identity? Right? When we think about identity, we all have different understandings of what it means. Yeah? We are all different here, right? Each one of us is super different from the other. Cool. So, an identity, some might say, is the qualities, beliefs, personality, looks, and or expressions that make a person or group. Right? So, we can argue that our physical differences are part of our identity. The way we see the world is another part of our identity. And the way we see ourselves is another part of our identity. This is where it gets tricky, because where do we draw the granica, the line, between the way the world sees us and the way we see ourselves? Can we find truth somewhere? I don't know. That's not for me to decide, right? It's a complicated question. I'm not going to answer it because there isn't an answer, right? Every person decides what is the answer for him or for her or for them, right? So how do we evaluate or understand cultural identity? Real questions. It's real life. Cool. So today I want to bring in another concept. It frustrates me a lot. Right? So in Russian, right, we have the слово национальность, right? In many other languages, you have the same word. It's not just in Russian, right? In Spanish, we have the word nacionalidad, right? Wow, same thing, right? But linguistically, in Russian, you use this word to represent many different things, right? Нормально. I just want to show you that in English, we actually have separated a few different concepts from the word nationality, or nationalность, right? So, first, there is the concept of race, right? So, in a manner similar to that, to the way that we have different breeds of dogs, right? A long time ago, humans, well, and they still are, were classified by physical traits, right? Color of skin, how heavy they are, their eye shapes, their hair, their ears, yeah? And we can say that this is a socially constructed identity, right? Потому что на самом деле, right, who gives us this label? We give these labels to each other, right? The labels come from society, right? So here is an example of what an American survey looks like. Census, называется, right? So when the American government wants to find out how many people are living in the United States, they send out forms. This is part of the form. It's a long form, right? And they say, hey, we want to know what your race is. Cool, right? So here we have a list of some races / ethnicities. So we have white, black, African American or Negro, American Indian or Alaskan Native, right? Print the name of enrolled or principal tribe, yeah, because there are many different tribes. Asian, Indian, Chinese, Filipino, other Asian, right? Japanese, you can read, I don't need to read. And, right, so that is sort of what race is, right? But we still have the concept of nationality tied in. I'm going to explain, I promise. Just give me a second. Right, so then we have ethnicity, or ethnic group, right? Этническая группа. Есть такое слово, но редко используется. Right? It refers to people who identify themselves based on common ancestral, cultural, national, and social experience, right? Again, this is a social construct, right? Because it comes from society, the experiences come from the way we live our lives, right? Some of them we choose, some of them we don't choose. Getting back to our melting pots, right? In the 1900s, Jews, Irish, and Poles were not considered to be white, right? Even though their skin color was white. Maybe they had some other different physical appearances, right? They were discriminated against because of their ethnicities, right? Because of the way that they self-identified, right? Racially, their physical characteristics were very similar, right? Maybe hair a little bit different if you're a Jew. Maybe your facial features are a little bit different if you're a Pole, right? But ethnically, right, the way that culture and their upbringing, их воспитывание, right, developed them, they had a difference, right? So it's weird, right?
And Russians, were they considered to be white?
Russians, I don't know. It's a good question. A lot of the people that came into New York at that time were Russian Jews, right? So when immigrants started thinking about Russians, right, they mainly thought about Jews, not specifically Russians, right? Cool. So we talked about race. We've talked about ethnicity. Let's move on to the real word of the day, nationality, all right? So as a political scientist, right, this word is important to me because it refers to a unique relationship between a person and a state based off of where they are born, right? So, I was born in America, right? I am by nationality an American, right? Ethnically, right, I am a Jew, right? Racially, I am white. Right? Wow, we have all of these 3 different categories. They mean different things, right? Linguistically, right, this is how we use these terms. They are separate linguistic terms, or political terms.
Kulturella, for example, an American of a Polish origin.
Yeah, several people do that. Several people do that, especially 2nd or 3rd generation Americans, right? They were born in America, but their grandparents were born, you know, in Poland or in Russia or in Ukraine, right? They often want to go back. They want to explore, you know, where their ancestors came from. Right? So, this whole concept of nationality suggests the existence of a set of rules, right, and rights, where you, as a member of society, have responsibilities and have rights, right? Nationality can either be inherited from parents, right? So, in the United States, if your parents were born in the United States and you were not, you can, well, in some cases, you can still be considered an American national, right? My friend, very good friend of mine, she was born in Germany, right? She's an American. She's not German. She doesn't speak a word of German, right? Cool. So, or it can be a natural phenomenon, right? So, mommy and daddy moved to the United States, or they live in the United States, you know, they have a nice time, and you're born in the United States. You're an American too, right? So, a person born in a certain state is a national of that state and is entitled to that state's protection. So what this means, right, if you are born in America, hypothetically, theoretically, you are entitled to certain rights, right? Protection, maybe healthcare, maybe? Not in America, but in many countries, yeah, and certain benefits, right? So, in a lot of languages, right, the term nationality has the sense of belonging to a certain ethnic group. Like in Russian, right? When people say, "Ну, кто ты по национальности?" right? And you say, "Oh, right, I am Chuvash," right? Or "I am Bashkir," right? You're still Russian, right? You're still Russian, but by nationality or by ethnicity, лучше использовать здесь, you are of a different ethnicity. Alright, let's get to the last word here. Citizenship, right? Гражданство. Simple, right? It is a legal condition which binds a person's belonging to a state's population, right? Население, right? So if you get that passport, right? You get that nice гражданство, right? So it's in addition to nationality. You can be an American national without American citizenship. It's weird. It's a weird thing. Right? Right? Or, for me, right, you can be a dual citizen or a dual national, тоже называется, where you have many different citizenships, one nationality, right? It gets complicated. Or it can be complicated. It can be as complicated as you want it to be. Right, so here we have a whole idea of what citizenship is, right? Citizens elect politicians to make laws which affect citizens, right? So it's a whole circle, a whole beautiful political circle. Okay, what does it mean to have an American cultural identity? Does it mean that Americans believe or follow all cultural myths? Does it mean Americans believe in one of the cultural theories? Not really. So I often, well, there is a point in the semester where I ask my students, I say, yo, so what is an average American, right? Who is an average American, right? Let's ignore the stereotypes, right? Yeah, a lot of Americans have big bellies, right? A lot of Americans talk loudly, right? I also speak loudly, right? But does that mean that all Americans are like this, right? Is there a unique American cultural identity? Some people say yes, some people say no. I think there is. I think it's based off of certain principles, right, that you learn from, that you are taught when you are young. That's my opinion. Cool. Cultural theories. I think there are elements of cultural theories that most Americans believe in, right? So where I am from in America, I am from the state of Maryland, right? I went to high school with people from Nigeria, right? Born in America. Parents are from Nigeria. Parents are from Bangladesh. Parents are from Russia, from, Georgia, right? And everyone lives side by side in pretty much normal conditions. Everyone's happy. We're all friends. Right, but that doesn't happen everywhere, of course. That's, you know, the world is not ideal, right? The world is not perfect. Okay, common confusions about American identity, right? So, we self-select certain traits to say, oh, that's an American trait. Oh, я сразу знал, что он американец. Right? So it comes from elements of ethnic groups, nationality, race, multiple citizenships. Right? Some people have questions, right? I don't know how to ask these questions, right? Right? Can I say, oh, are you Chinese? Or, oh, are you Korean? Right? So because we have so many different people who, you know, have these complicated identities, right? It can be really complicated if you ask them, oh, you know, you're American, right? And they're like, well, maybe, right? It's a complicated question. Some people can take offense if you say, oh, you're Chinese, and they're like, no, I'm American. And some people can take offense if you say, oh, you're American, and they're like, no, I'm Chinese, but I live in America, right? It's the same with Russians, right? Find the exact same thing with Russian people. Russian identity, right? So what are some key elements of Russian identity? Beyond stereotypes, this is just because cute bears. What are some elements of Russian identity?
I think the question is, what makes you Russian? What makes you Russian that doesn't make someone American? That's different. What's unique about you?
We are very direct.
Direct?
We are not flexible.
Yeah.
We speak what we really think.
Yeah. What else?
Americans do not.
Language! Yeah, language, first of all, right? Let's start simple, right? Language is a big part of Russian identity, right? The language of Pushkin, the language of Dostoevsky.
Oh no. These are slogans. The real language is far from it.
No,
Right?
it's not.
Well, modern language is a bit different. You know, people nowadays talk about abibas. Yeah. Abibas, siemichki, right? We can go on, right? But, you know, you can argue that identity evolves, right? It changes, right? Culture changes, culture develops, culture evolves, right? Modern Russian identity is different than the identity of Dostoevsky or Pushkin or Tolstoy, right? It's changing. But my point here, the reason why I'm asking for these comparisons is to show you that, honestly, we're not so different, right? We have all of these ways to categorize ourselves, right? We have different ways to perceive ourselves, but the reality is the biggest difference that we have is that we live in different countries, in different parts of Earth, and we speak different languages. And it's cool. Russian language is awesome. Okay, right. We talked about this. Cool. Questions from the crowd. Any questions?
What country are your ancestors from?
My grandma, well, my great-grandma and great-grandpa on my mom's side are both from Ukraine, from Odessa. And
Your Russian is pretty good.
thank you. My grandparents on my dad's side, well, a little bit different. My grandfather was born in Israel. His father was born in Lithuania, the Russian Empire, at that point in time. And on his mom's side, they were all from Scotland.
So how many languages do you speak?
4.
What are they?
Spanish.
So my first language is English. My second language, I grew up speaking at home, is Spanish. And third language is Hebrew. So I've had like a weird sort of life experience. So I was born in the United States, and then I moved to Peru, lived there for 3.5 years, moved to Israel, lived there for 3.5 years, moved back to the United States, finished university, came to Russia. I'm in Russia.
And do you speak Hebrew fluently?
Yeah. It's the language that I use with my dad
Yeah.
and my brother, because
I see.
no one speaks Hebrew.
How would you determine your ethnic group, by the way?
Oh, the way I determine my ethnic group, I see myself as a Jew. You know,
Russian Jew.
Just Jew.
Because from Odessa.
Well, yeah, sort of, right? So, I'm an Ashkenazic Jew, right? I'm an Ashkenazi, but I'm also like American and Israeli. I have, both of those played a huge role in my development, right? So being born in America, speaking English, right? That's an insane advantage, right? When you go abroad, sometimes it's really hard to realize how lucky you are that you speak a language that everyone wants to know, right? It's crazy, honestly. It's a crazy advantage. And moving to Israel, right? Another huge part of my development, right? It's wild, All my friends in Israel, they were all immigrants too, right? So we all had to find a common language. We all had to learn Hebrew together. They all came from Russia, from Ukraine, from Argentina, from Morocco, all coming, with different cultures, different accents. Some of my friends would say Aaron, right? Pronounce my name like that. Russians, they would say Aaron, and then the Latinos, they say Aaron, right? Yeah.
And I'd like to ask about Native Americans.
Uh-huh.
I think, how do they feel now in America?
Well, it's a complicated question.
Do they feel separated or in American society?
Well, some people definitely feel very separate from American society, and they want to preserve their identity. Some people are very assimilated in American society. Right now in Congress, we have 2 representatives who are registered with a tribe as being like authentic Native Americans. Native Americans also have special territories where laws work a little differently. They have more self-governance. But people are different, and it's, I'm not a Native American.
How are they treated?
I mean, they're, for the most part, they're treated pretty normally. So there is a whole concept of, a lot of them are given, if you say on like a job application that you're Native American, right, maybe that gives you some sort of advantage. Maybe that gives you some sort of advantage when you enter university, right, things like that.
But in the south, maybe, not in the north.
Why not?
No, everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Do you think there is a certain difference between northern and southern states now?
Oh yeah, there's always been a difference. Right, so I live right in between the north and the south, right, on the Mason-Dixon line, which separates the north and the south. And right, so where I live in the suburbs of the capital, right, so people are very different. But you go 45 minutes away from where I live to where my best friend lives on his farm, you'll see some really, really ridiculous things, like really ridiculous. Like, his neighbor is a KKK wizard. They've got a big cross and they burn it. Like scary. That's really, really scary. Yeah. And you go up north to Baltimore, where I studied, right? And Baltimore is also very different. It's completely different atmosphere. I haven't spent much time in the South, so I can't really speak much to Southern identity. But Andrew, right, he's from Texas. He talks about nastoyashi cowboy, right? I'm sure if you were to ask him about what life is like there, he could give a pretty good description.
Once I've seen a movie and it was said that there are universities in America where only African Americans.
No, there are schools where the majority of the population is African American, right? So these are called HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities. So when there was segregation, so when black people had separate educational institutions, right, they weren't permitted to mix with white people, right? So they established these institutions, and a lot of them are still running till this day, right? But they're open to everyone. It's just because of their history And because of the connection to African American communities, a lot of African Americans feel comfortable going there because, you know, because of the history and centuries of persecution. Yeah, my best friend, or from high school, he's like a super pasty white dude. Like, he's got really pale skin. He went to Howard University, so he was like, you know, a white dude where everyone else was, you know, African American. Chill. Cool.
Any more questions, guys?
Awesome. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful